Week 10 of the fantasy football season, and his tight end sits every matchup this week. Thursday Night Football, Panthers at the Bears. Hayden Hurst, we really haven't seen much out of him this season besides the first 2 weeks of the season. In his passing game, he's done much this year, but Adam Thielen. I know it's a good matchup versus the Bears, one of the worst defenses in the league, but Hayden Hurst is a sit. Cole Kmet's a start for me. Last week, 2 touchdowns with him and Tyson Bagent. And we know Justin Fields and Cole Kmet have a great rapport. I know Cole Kmet's had some great games this year and some games where he didn't do much, but this week here in a good matchup versus the Carolina Panthers, and possibly where they could put points up in this one in Chicago, especially Fields is back. He's a start. Indianapolis Colts, New England Patriots, Germany game. This each and every week, pretty much no fantasy value at all at the tight end position over there in Indianapolis. If it's Kylan Granson or Andrew Ogletree, they're not going to be starts. I know those guys have had a couple touchdowns this season, but besides that, they're not really in the game plan a lot and don't get a lot of targets or catches, obviously, so that's it. Hunter Henry is a start for me in this one. Hunter Henry, him and Mac Jones have been on the same page this season once again, and now with Kendrick Bourne out for the year over the last couple weeks, been out. Hunter Henry, he's getting more targets, and he did find the end zone last week, so this week here in a matchup where I think Mac Jones could at least make a few plays and get Henry the football, he's a start. Cleveland Browns at the Baltimore Ravens, David Njoku a borderline start for me. I know the last 2 weeks he found the end zone, but last week if he didn't have that touchdown, it pretty much was a 2-point fantasy day for David Njoku. And this week here in a tough matchup versus one of the better defenses at the Baltimore Ravens, especially at home, their defense plays on another level. At best, he's a borderline option for me. Mark Andrews this week will be the number 1 tight end in my rankings. We know he's healthy now. He's making plays, finding the end zone. And this Raven team, after a little bit sluggish start the first 4 weeks of the season, have taken off. And Mark Andrews has been a big part of it. So this week here in a division game and a big ball game, he's a start for me. Now to the Green Bay Packers at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Luke Musgrave, best game of his career last week. 3 catches, 51 yards, and a touchdown. But this week here, tough matchup on the road at Pittsburgh. Musgrave, he's been nicked up on and off this season. And this week here with the tough matchup and Jordan Love, me not trusting him getting the football to his playmakers in this game. Because we've seen Jordan Love struggle a lot, except last week he finally got it going a little bit in that victory versus the Rams. But this week, Musgrave is sit. Darnell Washington, he's filled in for Pat Freiermuth, and he really hasn't done much going in for Freiermuth. So right now, he hasn't been on the fantasy radar all season. And this week, once again, he's a sit. San Francisco 49ers at the Jacksonville Jaguars. So George Kittle, he's a start for me. Last game for Kittle versus Cincinnati Bengals, he had an explosive ball game going over 100 yards. In that one was George Kittle. So him and Brock Purdy were on the same page. But the only problem, obviously, the numbers might go down a little bit here over the next few weeks with Deebo Samuel most likely coming back in this week's ball game. But this week here in a good matchup versus Jacksonville, and George Kittle, I think, could be a great tight end the remainder of the season. He's a start each and every week. Evan Ingram, he's a start each and every week. He's been a top 7 tight end in fantasy points this season. I know San Francisco's got a good defense and got some reinforcements over the last few weeks with Randy Gregory and Chase Young in a deal. But right now, Evan Ingram, it don't matter the opponent. He just goes out there. Him and Lawrence have a great rapport, and he's a start once again this week. New Orleans Saints, Minnesota Vikings, Taysom Hill. He's been the ultimate gadget guy for this New Orleans Saints team, and a lot of packages in the red zone, throwing the football a few times a game, running the football, and even getting a catch or 2 per game. So right now this week here, in a pretty solid matchup with the Minnesota Vikings, where we know their defense isn't all that great, and this game could possibly be a shootout between these two teams. Taysom Hill, the last 4 or 5 weeks, he's putting up good numbers, and him qualifying at tight end and being the gadget guy he is in this offense is a huge asset for fantasy owners that have him on their roster. TJ Hawkinson, we know he's one of the best tight ends in the league. I know he's banged up, but he should play in this game, and him and Joshua Dobbs at the end of that game will make him play. So Hawkinson, a big target for any quarterback, could go out there and make plays. And Joshua Dobbs and Zach Ertz had a good rapport as well where he was with Arizona this season. So Hawkinson, once again, even with the quarterback change, with Cousins out for the season, he's a start each and every week and a top 5 option. Houston Texans at the Cincinnati Bengals, Dalton Schultz, the last 3 out of 4 games, he's been playing great football, and last week he exploded in that crazy victory for this Houston Texan team where Schultz had 10 catches, 126 yards, and a touchdown. So this week here versus Cincinnati Bengals, a team that just gave up 10 catches and over 80 yards to Dalton Kincaid. Dalton Schultz, he's a nice start once again. And him and CJ Stroud, like I said, the last month of the season, really been on the same page. and making plays. Now to the Bengals, Irv Smith Jr. or Drew Sample. I know last week both players found the end zone for the Cincinnati Bengal team, and I know Jamar Chase, there's a chance he could miss this ball game here as Jamar Chase, but I don't see these tight ends being factors week in and week out. And this week here versus Houston, they're both sits. For me, now to the Tennessee Titans at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Chig Okonkwo, we saw last season, he broke out towards the end of the year, having big ball games. But this season, it just hasn't been good for Chig Okonkwo. Obviously, that has to do a lot with Ryan Tannehill not getting the football down the field to his playmakers and not even giving them opportunities for the most part. I know their offensive line is one of the worst in the league, and I know Will Levis took some big hits last week. This is going to be the starter the rest of the way here. Okonkwo over the weeks, his value definitely will go up, but even this week, Levis in the lineup, he's not going to be a start for me. Cade Otton, a breakout game last week, and for the last few weeks, I've been saying Cade Otton's on that borderline to start type of option, but now after a big game last week with 23 fantasy points in PPR leagues, a big target in the middle of the field where teams just can't always double cover Mike Evans, where we know Cade Otton could be a playmaker in the team, and he's been one of the better tight ends to come out of college the last few years. So after coming off a big breakout game in him and Baker the last few weeks, definitely getting things going, he's a start for me. Now to the Detroit Lions, Los Angeles Chargers, Sam Laporta is a start. He's been one of the better rookie tight ends we've seen emerge onto the scene right away. So Laporta, him and Jared Goff have had great chemistry since week one. He's putting up double-digit fantasy points most weeks in PPR leagues. And this offense is a well-oiled machine. And now in a potential shootout at Los Angeles where both teams are going to go up and down the field, in my opinion, I see Sam Laporta having a big game. Gerald Everett's a sit for me. Some weeks he's putting up fantasy points, and some weeks he just doesn't do much, like we saw versus a tough New York Jet team where he put a nice play was Everett. So this week here, even in a potential shootout, like I mentioned, I don't see Everett doing much, and he's a sit. Now Atlanta Falcons at the Arizona Cardinals, Kyle Pitts and Jonnu Smith, obviously both their value has gone up with Taylor Heineke in their quarterback. Kyle Pitts, he had 9.5 fantasy points last week. Jonnu Smith had 100 yards receiving and found the end zone. And this week here, in a potential under-the-radar type of shootout with the Falcons at the Arizona Cardinals, I like both of these tight ends once again. They're good playmakers. They're yard-after-catch type of tight ends as well. And at least Taylor Heineke knows how to get the ball to his playmakers and guys who can make plays. So this week in a good matchup, I like them both as starts. Trey McBride is start for me. I know last week we didn't see much out of Trey McBride, but we didn't see much out of anyone with Clayton Tune at quarterback. But if everything goes right, Kyler Murray will be the quarterback in this game. Cardinal team. So Trey McBride 2 weeks ago versus the Ravens, we saw a monster game with Joshua Dobbs at quarterback, 10 catches, 95 yards, and a touchdown. And this week here versus a middle-of-the-pack Falcon team, even though the last 2 weeks teams have gone up and down the field on them. We saw Tennessee in Week 8 do it, and we saw in Week 9 the Minnesota Vikings do it. So Trey McBride, great playmaker, one of the top college football tight ends a few seasons ago. And he's a start with Murray in the lineup. New York Giants, Dallas Cowboys, Daniel Bellinger last week, a solid game, 7.5 fantasy points. And we know this Giant team's going to have to throw a whole lot. Tommy DeVito in there quarterback, but who knows if Tommy DeVito might even survive this game with Micah Parsons and this vicious Cowboy pass rush. But anyway, Daniel Bellinger, last season we saw flashes from him, but this week I just can't trust him in a tough matchup. He's a sit. Jake Ferguson a start. The last 2 weeks, Ferguson has found the end zone for this Dallas Cowboy team. And we know Dak Prescott, I say it pretty much every video, him and the tight end throughout his career has been a main target in this Cowboy offense, going back to Jason Witten early in his career. The last few seasons, Dalton Schultz, and now Jake Ferguson this season, being 10 tight end in fantasy points. So once again, here in a plus matchup versus the Giants, he's a start. Now Washington Commanders at the Seattle Seahawks. Logan Thomas, I know he's had a good season once again this year. I know last week wasn't a great game, only 4 catches, 31 yards, but this week I think he has a better game versus Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. It's going to be a lot of throwing, I believe, for this Washington Commander team. And Sam Howell, we know Logan Thomas is one of his favorite targets, and Howell's a gunslinger, a quarterback that's going out there for the most part, and it seems like every weekend 300 yards per game. So this week here, even at Seattle, I like Logan Thomas to bounce back. Noah Fant, he's a sit for me. Noah Fant had a couple decent games early in the year, but right now he's the 4th, 5th option on this offense behind a DK Metcalf, Nick Jababa, Tyler Lockett as well, and Kenneth Walker. So right now, this week, I know it's a decent matchup versus the Commanders that give up fantasy points to tight ends this year, but he's a sit. Now, Sunday Night Football, Jets at the Vegas Raiders. Tyler Conklin, we've seen some flash games out of him. I know in the deepest of leagues, if you need a tight end, I don't think he's the worst options, but tight end positions has been getting better over the last few weeks here, with guys like Cade Otton breaking out, Luke Musgrave having decent games, Cole Kmet coming off a monster game. So like I said, tight end's been stronger this year over the last few weeks than we've seen many seasons. So Conklin's a sit. Because Zach Wilson, he's just not a consistent quarterback. He really don't get the football down the field. I know Conklin has had some decent games this season, but this week he's a sit. Michael Mayer, a sit for me as well. I don't see this Raider team really moving the football a lot in this one, because this Jet defense, they're one of the better defenses in the league, and they get pressure on the quarterback where it makes it tough for him to make clean throws and get the football to his playmakers. And Aiden O'Connell, I don't see him doing much to even get Devontae Adams the ball that much, or Jacoby Myers. And Michael Mayer, I don't see him doing it as well in this one. He's a sit. And then final game of the week, Monday Night Football, Denver Broncos at the Buffalo Bills. Adam Trautman, he hasn't been a fantasy option this week. Denver, pretty much, it's all about throwing the football to the running backs and Judy and Cortland Sutton, where the tight end's pretty much been a blocker this season for this Bronco team. And a tough matchup, and Trautman not doing anything this year. He's a sit. And Dalton Kincaid, it only took him a couple weeks to get things going, and last week another monster game for Kincaid. He's working the seam of the field. Josh Allen has a lot of confidence in him, obviously, and rightfully so. And this Bill team, we know they spent the 26th pick overall to get Dalton Kincaid. So right now, one of the better playmaking tight ends, and moving up the ranking board over the last 2 or 3 weeks here. Once again, in a good matchup versus the Denver Broncos. Dalton Kincaid is a start this week, so that's tight end start sits every matchup for week 10 of the fantasy football season.